Kirk Johnson. I'm president of the BMW Motorrad Club in Northern Illinois. In this do-it-yourself video, I'm going to show you the steps that I take when I flush out my brake system and the clutch system on this bike. This bike being a 2000 K1200LT with non-integrated brakes. And non-integrated meaning that if I grab onto this front brake here, it does not apply the rear brake also. Also, it does not have any kind of an electric servo motor inside there that will pump the brakes for me as well. This is a very manual system, so it's limited in its scope, but it will gives you kind of an over-the-shoulder view of how to flush brakes on these older bikes. So if you feel like donating to our club, please click on the link that's down in the corner of the website, and I hope that you enjoy them, and I hope you get something out of them. Thank you for watching. The way that we would flush these brakes out, now I've got the covers and everything on this bike are gone. All the fairings and everything on my bike here are taken off. This is not something you need to do for the brake service. I've been doing a lot of different videos, and please check out those other videos on how to do some of the other basic maintenance, even some of the more advanced maintenance like checking the valves, changing the fuel filter and the air filter, spark plugs. I'm doing the brakes now. I'll be doing the clutch as well in this video, and showing how to flush that. Also, in other videos, I'll have oil changes and the different lubes and stuff like that. Anyways, so we're starting here on the front brakes, and the first thing you want to do is get the handlebars turned all the way to the left and then locked into place, so that they're gonna move on you. The other thing that's like vitally important now, if you leave your covers on here, your fairings, you're gonna definitely need to cover those up. I'd put a plastic bag over them and then throw a towel over that, just to double make sure that nothing gets through, because as most people know, brake fluid and paint do not mix ever. The other thing that is really important to do is to cover this wing here, and also maybe your windshield, because if you go and you squeeze this while this covers off, brake fluid will shoot right out of here and land on this little air wing here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then proceed. Alright, so now I got everything covered up here. I've got my I like to use one of these little Mighty Vacs to get the fluid out of here. It's very important to get the fluid out of here first and take it down to the little holes that are in the bottom. So you just use a Phillips screwdriver here. I like to break everything loose first, push down nice and hard, break it loose, and then remove the screws. Now, as to interval on this thing, I do my brakes and my clutch every single year. Whether I ride much or not ride much, this gets done once a year on my bike. I know the book says to do it every 2 years. I like to do it every year because it keeps me, I think it just keeps things a little more fresh, and reduces the chances that there's going to be a problem later on. Alright, so you pull this cover off of here. Okay, maybe not. I'm going to go get a different tool. Things for sure, these videos are not edited well. Okay, so I'll pry the cover up. And there's my fluid. Now my fluid actually looks very, very clean in here. And this is the first time I've actually looked at my fluid since I did this last year. One thing I can tell you right off the bat here, noticing this, is last year I changed my brake lines out to the stainless braided lines. And the fluid, after 1 year, the last time I did this, was very dark colored. And I have to attribute that to exactly that, to just changing out those lines. It really seems to have made a big difference. Now again, you want to make sure that everything's covered up down here. You don't want any brake fluid to drip on the plastics. That's why I have this towel here, and also a plastic bag under that. The gas tank, I don't really care about that so much. It's not going to get really affected. But I start off by sucking out the brake fluid that's in here, because I don't want any brake fluid to go, I don't want any of the old brake fluid to go down in there as I flush things out. Alright. And you can see the color of this stuff. It's really, it really looks very clean. I'm almost tempted to not do this, but for the sake of this video, I am going to do it anyway. Besides, it'll make me feel better. Alright, next we're going to go down to the, down by the brakes themselves and get that prepped. And always use fresh brake fluid here. This is .4 brake fluid that I'll be putting back in here. And inside this, when you're filling this up to the levels, right inside here, up in the front of it, there's a little two-step thing here. You want to fill the brake fluid up to those steps so that you know you have enough in here, and keep this thing full when you're flushing. My gosh, keep it full. Otherwise, you're going to introduce air into it. That's a whole nother can of worms. Then you gotta really flush like crazy to get the air out of it. But anyways, we're gonna continue on. Alright, so down here at the brake caliper now, I've already refilled my reservoir up at the top with fresh fluid. If you have any debris inside that reservoir, don't be afraid to get a paper towel or something and wipe that out of there. Get as much of that garbage out of there as you can. I know that on older bikes like this one, there tends to, I don't know where it comes from, but there's dirt and all kinds of crap that gets in the little reservoir. So clean that thing out as best as you can. I'm going to pull this little boot off of here. It's a little protector boot for the flush. Sometimes you'll have a grub screw here. It's a little screw that looks like that, a little hex screw that's down inside there. You have to pull that off and replace it with a bleeder. I'm not going to show how to do that because frankly I don't have another bleeder. Anyways, I got the wrong size wrench, of course. Alright, so it's an 11 millimeter on this bike. So what you want to do here is just crack this loose and then tighten it back up a little bit, so just make sure it doesn't start leaking on you. Another thing you may want to do too is cover up this area down in here on the wheel with throw an old towel or something down there. Make sure you don't get any, try not to get any brake fluid on the paint down here. Now this paint is it's powder coat paint, so it's pretty resistant to the effects of brake fluid. However, I don't want to take any chances, so I'm going to lay a towel down in here. There we go. Now I take my little mighty vac here to make sure this thing's cleaned off pretty good. Loosen this thing up. Put one of the little caps on there. Loosen it up. And you'll start seeing fluid come out of it right away. This is not even vacuuming it out of here. It'll just start draining. Because this one's not integrated, there's really no checks or stops in it. This is just a very straight brake system. There is an anti-lock system on here, and it does run through the anti-lock system, which I'll show how to flush that in a little bit. But I start off with the brake here, and you can see you can kind of get an idea of the color here. It looks really pretty good, but I'm going to pump it up just a little bit, give it like 1 or 2 pumps, just to start drawing some of that fluid out of there. And while this is doing this, well, I can see it going into the little cup down here at the bottom. You know, I can see it through the turns on here. Anyway, now you're going to start seeing bubbles and stuff that come up through here. It's really just leakage coming through the cap. So as this thing slowly starts going through there, I'm going to just make sure that my cup doesn't run dry, and just wait for this to run completely clear. And that's going to flush this side of it out. I'm going to repeat the same procedure on the other side. The other side is going to take a very little time to do, because all this fluid is coming through here. It actually feeds, there's a crossover here, as you might see or on your bike or whatever. There's a little crossover that comes over here down to the other brake. So all you're going to have to do is flush basically from here to the brake caliper. A lot of guys like to they like to spread the brake pads out. They like to get a tool in there and push the brake pads away. That's really not a bad way to do things, because it forces all that bad fluid out, all the old fluid. But I'm gonna let this one not do that for right now. You can see it's a little darker than it was up at the top. So the darkness in brake fluid, it pretty much is relation to how much moisture is in there. Brake fluid is very hygroscopic in that it takes on water from the environment, whether you run through a lot of rain, whatever. Somehow water always seems to manage to get itself in there, whether it's just humidity or maybe there's not a really good seal up at the top. Anyways, water gets into the system, and it definitely causes problems. It turns the fluid black. So if your fluid is really dark, change it. Don't mess around. You're only going to help yourself. So again, as I was saying before, some people like to put a tool or even a wide spatula or anything in there just to push the brake pads back all the way out, because it forces the fluid that's up inside here to squeeze out. And then when you pump the brakes back up the next time you do this, you'll have nothing but clean fluid in here. It's a really good idea. In fact, I think I may actually do that myself, just because it's a good idea. Now you see all these bubbles coming out of here. That's really just air leaking around here. There's no air in the system. It's not coming in. These things are not foolproof. They sometimes you can take some grease, put a glob of grease along here, and then push this on, and it will seal that up. I mean, I've done this enough times to know that this air is not in my system. I didn't have any air in my system at all. These brakes were working absolutely perfect. And if you don't have these, like Spiegler, these are made by Spiegler company. If you don't have these on your bike, boy, do I highly recommend putting them on there. You can't believe how much these little things change your whole braking system. You put these on there, not only are they not going to break, of course, they're not going to burst or anything, but they really make the brakes more responsive. There's no give, there's no rubber to give, and well, it just changes the whole characteristic of the bike, of the brakes especially. So anyways, I'm gonna keep going here. I'm gonna go get some tools and pry this thing off, but pry the brake pads away. Alright, don't forget to continually check that thing. If you're doing this on your own and you're just working on this by yourself in your garage or whatever, seriously, check that thing a lot, that reservoir up at the top. You do not want that thing to run dry. It's not the end of the world if it runs dry. You just really don't need it to run dry. Alright, I'm just trying to pry the brake pads away from the disc here, and you can see fluid shooting out when I do this. Alright, now I'm getting a grip in there. You just want to do it carefully so that you don't chip up your brake pads real bad. Yeah, you can see there's quite a bit of, I don't know if you can't really see it on the video, but it's a lot darker right now as I'm prying these pads away. And it gives you also a good chance to take a look at your brake pads, see how they're doing. Make sure everything's cool. Alright, the front one's all the way back. I'll check my fluid again just to make sure nothing's going on there. Need an assistant out here to just monitor this reservoir. If you have an assistant like that teenage son of yours that's sleeping right now, go get him so he can stand guard on this thing and make sure that reservoir doesn't go empty on you. Now we're getting somewhere. Alright. I'm just going to leave that in there. For now. Alright, I'm going to keep doing the same procedure here. I'm going to keep filling this up. I'm going to pump this up, this Mighty Vac up just a little bit, and wait until this goes clear, and then I'll come back. Alright, so now it's all clear. It's running clear now. We're good. It's all flushed out on this side. So I'm going to close this up by hand just to kind of get a little bit of a handle on it. Okay. You can kind of see the color gradient there. The bad stuff's at the bottom, the nice clean new stuff is at the top. But it's all done. Another thing to remember too, if you do get any brake fluid on any of your painted parts, wash them off right away with water. The water does neutralize brake fluid very well, and it'll get it cleaned up and it'll be fine. Hopefully you catch it in time. Alright, so now with this side done, I'm going to move over to the other side and do that side, do the same procedure on the other side. I'll show that procedure as well. Anyways, so we're gonna just cover this up for now, or we can just leave it open for right now, because we may have to go back after we test the brakes just to make sure we don't have any error in the system. We may have to come back and redo it if somehow there has been a little bit of error that's been introduced in there. The brakes will feel real spongy when you squeeze them. So remember, this is for the non-integrated brakes. This is just standard brakes on a bike. Alright, so same procedure over on this side. We're going to take the little mighty vac, attach it on here, break this loose, and let it flow. Give it a couple pumps. There it is. I'm not even pumping on it and it's already coming out. So like I said, this side's not going to take very much at all to do. It's going to be very, very little. I'm going to pry those brake pads away a little bit to get all the old fluid out of them, out of the caliper. And we'll continue flushing and close this up and be done with them. So we're going to tighten this side up now that it's run clear again. It down, and we're going to go up to the top and make sure that the fluid's full. Set the cap on there by hand, and then just pump the brake real slow, and just make sure that you don't have to pull the screws out again to redo it, because there's air in the system. Alright, so back at the top, we're going to top this thing up to those two lines that are on there. We're going to take the cap here and just clean it off a little bit, make sure there's nothing on it. Alright. Now I just set it in there. And I'm just setting it on there just so that when I squeeze the handle, it's not going to come shooting out of there. But I got to pump up the brakes a little bit now, because we pried them away down at the bottom. I'm seeing some air shoot in there, and I don't like that. Well, I think I just ingested air in there because it's not pumping up. I did have air ingested into the system, so I had to reflush everything again and pay even better due diligence to how much fluid was in this thing. It got down a little bit low, it sucked some air in there, so we wound up with air in the system. So now just now I have resistance here at the handle. When I pump slowly, I can feel it. It's back. And so now I'm just going to close up the system here. So make sure everything's cleared up as good as you can. Cleaned off real good. Make sure there's no dirt and garbage on the lid. Make sure our levels are up where they're supposed to be, which they are. Oh, wrong way. Okay. The other way that you can do this, if you don't have a little mighty vac, is to do this manually, but have somebody else help you. And if you have an assistant to help you, the little bleed screw that's down at the caliper, you can open it up and then have your assistant pump the brake. So they're going to squeeze it in while it's open, and you're going to close it and then tell them to open it and then close, and just keep repeating that procedure, basically pumping the brakes. You're going to use the brake as a pump to force all the old fluid out. Now, there is a torque spec on these. I don't have a little tool for it, so I just like to kind of just snug everything down. Okay. You always get a little bit on these bikes that come out right here at the corner. You can see it's on my finger when you first do this. So I take just a little rag and I slip it in between it and just kind of drag it through there, and it pulls all the old fluid out, or the leaking fluid, the stuff that seeped out when you're putting the cap on. So that's it. That's basics of the brakes here.